Welcome to the Developing Good Humans, a Toolkit for Storytellers expert video. This is the third in a series. And I am joined today by a scholar and a storyteller but we like to think that it's all mixed together. We're all scholars, we're all storytellers. And so I will ask each of you to introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself. Let's start with Mary Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Immordino-Yang. I am indeed a scholar and a storyteller, and I sort of, fuse the two in the way I do my research. So I'm a professor of education, psychology, and neuroscience at University of Southern California, and I'm the director of the Center for Affective Neuroscience Development, Learning, and Education, which is CANDLE. And I study the ways that people make meaning from stories, the stories we construct inside our own selves, the stories that we kind of embody and live within when we're together with other people, and what that means for development and young people's well-being and their intellectual and civic engagement and growth, and what it means for the design of schools and for the work of teaching.
So not really much. Nothing.
No, it's a very narrow topic.
And Olly, how about you?
Hey there, I'm Olly Sholotan. I'm an actor, singer, music producer. I'm primarily a storyteller, but I am also a scholar. I come from an education-based background. I went to UCLA. I got my BA in musical theater, but while I was there, I took a huge interest in mental health and advocacy and the ways in which storytelling can impact people positively.
Awesome. Well, that's what we're all about. And that's why we're here, is to talk about how storytelling positively can impact people, and in particular adolescents, ages 10 to 25. And sort of, why don't we start first with Olly? And, we're talking about character virtues and things like, being grateful, being honest, these sort of moral things, but also some things that are all about life skills, things like curiosity, how storytelling can really sort of be imbued with these. I think good storytelling is imbued with these things just intrinsically. But how do you think about that? And how do you think it can, how these kinds of virtues can, and we look at Gen Z. So how could it positively impact Gen Z as they think about identity development and think about themselves?
Well, it's interesting because I think that our stories and our culture, I think culture reflects society, and it's sort of a two-way street. And then society then has a way of reflecting culture as well. And so I think that the stories that we show and the stories that we watch and we, engage with have this, and granted, my understanding of it is very anecdotal, right? I haven't done the research to support this, but it has this effect of kind of normalizing what behaviors we see as not only encouraged, but allowed and possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen even directly just something like the Barbie movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember Barbie movie came out and it sort of started this conversation around what feminism can be and the effects that misogyny has not only on women but also on men. And whether wherever you fall on, oh, it was too elementary, to whatever, the fact that we're even having that conversation of what it means to be positively moral, I think is really speaks to the impact that storytelling can have on what people think and talk about.
And you're totally right. I mean, one thing that has been studied a lot about stories and fictional, non-fictional, but long form audiovisual, is that they shape social norms. That, we look to stories and, stories have been around forever, and love to Mary Helen to talk about her work, but they are how people share with other people, how people should be, or what we think the world is, or and sometimes they can reflect social norms that can actually not be positive, but sometimes they can reflect social norms that really can positively impact young people. And that's what we are really trying to do at the center, and what we're trying to do with this toolkit is help storytellers find ways to portray these character strengths in ways that research shows will have the most positive impact for young people. So Mary Helen, you do storytelling, as you said, and you think about how stories, how people make meaning with stories, and you've had some really, really interesting research around that. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So to start, I'll say, I mean, I think neurobiologically, when we actually look inside the brain and the body and measure, the ways that people's physiology is dynamically shifting and organizing itself when people are reacting to stories, when they're constructing a sense of self, which in effect is a story. Stories aren't just to influence other people, they're also to decide who we are, right? And to make sense of the things we're experiencing and witnessing. They're the stuff of identity. They're the stuff of sort of plans and possible futures. And so, what we found that I think is really quite striking, but really not surprising when you talk to storytellers, but when you talk to scientists, they really are quite dumbfounded by this, which is that when you talk to young people about the meaning they make of complex stories. So we did an experiment with a 5-year-long longitudinal experiment where we sat with 60 kids from low SES immigrant backgrounds in LA. So these are representative kids, all passing their classes in school, doing what they're supposed to be doing. But just, other than that, just typical kids from neighborhoods around us who are interested in participating in a study, right? And they came and we sat with them. We did a lot of talking to those kids to try to understand them. But we sat with each one of them for a full day. We spent time with them and we asked them about 40 true stories that we had culled from around the world about the stories of real teenagers experiencing all kinds of complex situations. I think there was something really compelling in that case for making them true, right? Because kids can't kind of really, push back on it. This is what happened. So what do you think, right? And then we just asked the kid, how does this person's story make you feel after each sort of documentary film? And then we moved him into the MRI scanner and we asked him to watch the sort of crux of each story again and to just a long gray screen, react, think about it, and push buttons to tell us how strongly emotionally engaged they are with it. And then we also studied just the structure of their brain and what happens when their brain's just resting and they're just relaxing and thinking about whatever they want. Long story short, the ways that kids talked about their reactions to stories above and beyond things we could measure that are standardized, like IQ, socioeconomic status, their parents' education levels, their ethnic affiliations, above and beyond all those factors, when kids were looking for the bigger meaning in the story, when they were trying to figure out not just how they should feel about this girl in Pakistan who the Taliban shot, but like what it would mean for how they should understand the world and who they are in it, what's possible, what's wrong, what's right? When they're starting to make these bigger interpretive inferential lessons from story, the inclination to do that, which all of the 65 kids did to varying degrees, but they all did it over the 2-hour interview. The propensity to do that was independent of IQ, independent of all those other demographic factors, and predicted the future growth in that young person's brain. So we had, someone come in at age 15, they come back at age 17, and we compare their 2 scans to each other. And we can predict the growth in their brain. And in turn, the growth in their brain, which is based on this propensity to engage richly with stories, was in turn predicted the quality of their identity development when they were 19 years old and 20 years old. So the degree to which they endorse statements that are like, I've spent time thinking about what I really believe in, who I want to be, and I've talked to people I care about and trust about those important questions, those kinds of things. Not what we're trying to figure out what they are going to be, but that they are thinking about who they want to be, right? And then in turn, that predicts young adult life satisfaction, how much they like themselves on a little slidey thing we sent them an email, right? Like, how much do you like the person whom you've become? Slide the little slider back and forth, right? Here's a whole bunch of different relationships you might have in your life. How satisfied are you with each of these, right? And how much do you like the opportunities you have at school or at work? How much do you think those are what you've always wanted for yourself? And they really are just exactly helping you to be who you want to be, right? Those kinds of essential outcomes that we care most about for our young adults were predicted by the ways young people were interacting with and attempting to make sense out of, grappling with the complexities of stories in their mid-adolescent years.
So essentially, you're saying by the amount a young person in that mid-adolescent age engaged with the story and really tried to figure it out in some
Right,
way?
to figure out not just the story itself. That was one thing, and that was associated with well-being and a diversity of friendships and getting along well with your teacher and all these other things. But what really predicted brain development was the degree to which the kid tried to step back and think, wait a minute, and get curious about it and think, what does this mean for the world? So, okay, that girl in Pakistan with this group called the Taliban, what are they again? The Taliban, right? But I didn't know. You telling me not everybody in the world who wants to go to school gets to go to school? Like, I didn't know that was the case. Like, wait, I should maybe work harder with the opportunities that I have because I take it for granted. I didn't know that. And like, maybe I could do something about that because, you know, now that I think about it and they stop and pause for a while, I think, that's not right. It makes me really upset that this, right? So they started being upset about the girl in Pakistan, which is legitimate, but they become upset about the fact that such a thing could exist in the world, right? And then they bring it back to think, what could I do about it? What does this mean for me? What does it mean for the nature of what's right, what's good, what isn't good, who I
Got
could
it.
believe, who I could
Yep.
believe? The propensity to grapple with that level of meaning making,
Yep.
that is what predicted the growth.
So, Olly, meaning making, right? We know that stories are how you make meaning of the world, young people. And you were on this show and dealing with all sorts of things in this show and demonstrating sort of issues that probably haven't been shown, in particular with, you know, different kinds of races and ethnicities and, you know, mental health issues and seeking help. How have you found that young people have responded? Are they making meaning from this? Are you feeling that sort of coming back at you?
I mean, in a from a material standpoint, I would say every day, every other day, I either get a new story shared with me or someone, you know, approaches me on the street or DMs me or whatever of just, hey, I'm a young Black kid. I struggle with anxiety and seeing and watching your character go through the ups and downs of dealing with his mental health and seeking help and going to therapy and talking to his parents about it, like that has helped me not only feel seen but also it's given me the push that I need to go to therapy, right? It's given me the push that I need to actually talk about. And in fact, I remember in one particular case someone had said I didn't even know that the thing that I was experiencing had a name. I just assumed that this is how everyone, I just assumed this is how everyone dealt with the world, that like the heart was always beating really fast. And, and so to me that, I don't know, as an artist, that really is the greatest gift in the world to know that my work is resonating with people in an actual material way that they are seeking help and it is bringing betterment to their lives.
Do you
Yeah.
feel a responsibility too? Like, does it ever sometimes go, oh, whoa, I'm just an actor. Like this is, you know, but cause you know, you and I have talked a little when I did that other panel with you, we're really thinking about how you can take what's on the screen and they're seeing this and they're getting inspired and they're learning and then making sure that there's resources alongside the show that will, you know, get them to an expert or get them to the resources.
There there
Yeah.
is a responsibility, right? And I think now more than ever, where every actor has however many thousand followers or whatever, and they have the ability to reach so many people. And one tweet, one Instagram post, one whatever, one shining a light on a certain resource could change so many people's lives. And so that's that. Yes, there are a lot of times where I'm like, oh wow, this is, but I, I think it's a matter of, I also recognize that at the end of the day, I'm taking it a day at a time. I do not have all the answers. And this is why, I look to people like you two who study this, who are,
I don't know all the
academics
answers either.
about it.
Full disclosure up front, but okay.
No, this
But
is
no,
we
it is.
bring us all together to solve the answers together because I think the storytellers and the scholars both have
Oh yeah.
incredible things that they bring, and when you bring them
Yeah.
together.
And also, this, but our writing team and our producers are so careful about making sure that we're consulting experts on all of these. Like every scene about therapy, we've consulted experts and actual therapists and doctors on about, discussing medication or whatever, however much minutia we want to get into it. It's so we do have a responsibility to represent this stuff as accurately and as correctly and responsibly as possible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one of the things that, and either of you can answer this, one of the things we really tried to do with the work and these tip sheets, we've created tip sheets, like 9 tips to integrate this, is we looked at it with an intersectional lens because, for example, being humble, humility is a virtue that everyone says is good. You shouldn't, but women who are humble are not treated the same way as men who are humble. We also looked at curiosity. Curiosity is a great thing. You should want to explore. You should want to know your neighborhood or other people's neighborhood. But a Black kid, in particular a Black boy, exploring someone else's neighborhood and is curious may not have the same ability to do that. So wondering in either of your work, like how do you bring that these values that we say everyone should have that have been set from a particular point of view in our culture and the world, how do we make sure that they resonate? Because in theory, they're all things we all want, but we don't all get rewarded, equally. And some of us might get harmed for exhibiting these things.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about, I know I don't have all the answers, because this is an issue, and I was speaking to a friend about this the other day, which is that curiosity for everyone doesn't reward the same values. And I think we live in a society that is so complex that the factors that I put into a machine will not beget the same answers that you put into that exact same machine, because our machines look different. But I think it sort of ends up being a bigger conversation of who's at the helm of these stories, who's writing these stories, who's represented in these stories. And I think it ends up being one of those things where all things are kind of true in a way, right? I think as we have more diversity in storytelling, and as we have more women of color writing these stories about their experience of curiosity, and we have more people in the LGBTQ community writing these stories of their experience in humility or boldness or whatever. I know in both Bel Air and this other show on Apple TV Plus called Swagger deal with this issue of what happens when you have a young Black boy who in sports is willing to be bold. Right. And some could say that boldness is the opposite of humility. But in this specific case, boldness is actually the thing that should be striven for, right? Because young Black men have been told our whole lives to be humble and not take up too much space. And so I think the answer to that comes more so from the diversity in storytellers. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd be hard pressed to find just a quick and easy answer.
No, and it's not. I mean, it's not black or white. There's nuance. Mary Helen, what do you think?
No, there's no correct answers, but a couple things I'll note. I mean, I think one of the dispositions that storytelling in the mainstream media sense can usefully promote is just the opportunity and the sort of modeling of this kind of reflectiveness. Like, we can step back and think about our own positionality in different situations. We can step back and actually be, empathize with that young Black sports player who's super bold, but also watch him in really great storytelling. Watch him deconstruct that boldness in a situation where he's actually taking it apart and questioning his own behavior, and then coming to decide maybe to be like that or not to be like that, or right. But just the disposition to query ourselves and to query other people's experiences and behaviors from a deeper perspective taking than just meets the eye, I think is doing a real service to our society, and especially to our young people, but really to the grown-ups too, right? About what it takes to be a good citizen, what it takes to develop yourself in such a complex, like Olly said, such a complex, diverse nation. This is a massive experiment, this democracy that we're running for so long with so many kinds of people in it. We need to invent new ways to be together and not just plow ahead as if we know the answers. Anybody And then the other thing I think is that, this is what therapy is predicated on, right? The act of deconstructing the experiences we have and narratizing them in various ways makes us inherently more resilient, both as an individual and as a community, as a culture, which is one of the powers of these kinds of storytelling in mainstream media. The opportunity and the modeling to step back and think about things and actually reflect upon them, take them apart, look at them from many lenses, engage in them in many ways, is something that produces benefits for ourselves as well as for those around us. And then the third thing I'll just drop on the table, which I know isn't the main point of today, and you know what I'm going to say, Yalda, is that I think it's not an accident that our mainstream educational systems punish these kinds of dispositions of mind. It's not just that we don't support curiosity or humility or humbleness or perspective taking or complex ways of understanding nuance in our mainstream traditional ways of educating and of holding people accountable for what they've learned, right? It's that we actively teach kids, like, put up the no peekies, don't be looking at other people's things. Why are you talking to her? This is your work. And like those kinds of very standard, traditionally unexamined ways of raising kids inside educational institutions are actually setting them up for the kinds of fraught problems that we're now facing in the generation of kids that are in Gen Z now. And I think we need to take a really hard look about what we are promoting and sort of privileging and lifting up as the model for young people in the different institutionalized settings that we expect our young people to grow themselves in.
Yeah, and that is actually why, that's why I think storytelling and media and mass media and culture can come in, because those institutionalized settings are getting more and more restricted and ridiculous.
Can't we fix that though?
Well, what's so interesting, again, another anecdotal thing, but I went to a performing arts high school. I was fortunate enough to go to a performing arts.
That's a different setting. That's a very different setting.
And when I hear about other people's experience with high school and how they look back at high school, it's so foreign to me, because I find that so much of what I was able to get out of high school is because it was this, performing arts mishmash of things. We were encouraged to be curious and find other ways to find the same answer. And I think in that is how, as an adult, I've been able to build such a diversity in thought. And I genuinely, like, I have this running joke with my friends where it's like, I will never reach the same answer in the same way as anyone else does. Like, we'll get there. We'll get to the same destination. Lord knows what journey I'm going to take to get there.
I love it. So thinking about what you were saying, Mary Helen, I like several things came to mind. One is like, can we help young people who are consuming a story to reflect upon it? Like, that's what you found in your research.
Storytellers.
So we're not just consuming the information,
right.
And that is sort of actually Olly speaking to that stuff, the bonus content or the content around, to help them sort of, and social media can do that, right? You can have a conversation with someone, and there are channels and Reddit threads and all sorts of places where people are talking and deconstructing the content. So can we have young people reflect that and connect it to their own identity? And then the other piece I was thinking about is, how can we get storytellers to do that? And I'll give you one example. We did a study on the American dream, and the American dream is overrepresented in content, in traditional storytelling. For a reason. It's pick yourself up by the bootstraps, you can succeed, and that's a good story. You want to see that inspirational thing. But it's twice as frequent for people of color in content, again. And the reason is, I think, is you want to model a very successful person of color, a woman, or somebody who's succeeded, but it's the opposite of reality. And so we're sort of, and I think this generation, our research that we released a few weeks ago, Teens and Screens, young people this generation wants authentic, real storytelling. So then you challenge, when I've shared that with storytellers, they've been like, oh, and you like, but what do I do? Like, a good story will tell the story. I don't want to, make it this really horrible story where nobody achieves anything. And you know what? You're like, okay, you can do it, but do it real authentically. think about this, the barriers and what they actually had to go through, and show those things along the way. Add the nuance, add the add the reality. That kid didn't get the same, had to take 2 hours to the bus to get to school. That's a lot different than the kid that lives right next door, has their own car. Or these things that maybe they both achieved the American dream, but show what they had to do to get through it.
And the assets, the unique assets that kids from various backgrounds bring, they can arrive, like you said, in the same place, but are they the same when they get there? They may be bringing all kinds of new perspectives and richness of experience that we can contribute to the conversation for all of us. We can all learn from. So we don't all have to standardize the outcome. We can become different people, and amen to that, right? That's actually how a thriving, flourishing society innovates and actually builds structures that are maximally useful, beneficial, ethical, equitable.
Like, how do you go ahead, Olly? Yeah.
Well, I think at its core, it's to think of specifically with the American dream and how and every individual's different relation to the idea of the American dream. I think, if you are a storyteller and let's say you're writing a script or a movie or a TV show or whatever, and if it's about the American dream, I think the answer is, who are the people in that room with you writing that story?
Yeah.
Right? What does your producer look like? What does your head writer look like? What does your director for that episode look like? And the more diversity in thought, the more authentic I think you can get. Because you please tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the issue is the American dream. I think the issue is, what is every single person's individual relationship to that idea? For some people, the American dream is unattainable. For some people, it's something that they've been told isn't for them. For others, it's something that they've been told it's their God-given right. For others, so what is then, how do we all, as we exist in the society, reconcile our various relationships to that one thing? And I think that's where you find authenticity. So it doesn't mean that every story needs to be depressing and, just the saddest thing you've ever seen. I think every story just needs to be honest. And I think that honesty comes from diversity in storytelling, I think.
No, and that's so true. And it could be somebody also in that room, in that writer's room, or in the producers, and then it might end up in the actual story reflected in the screen, saying, I don't care about that. I care about this. Like we one of the stats we have in our tip sheet is young people, the number one value Gen Z has in this survey that came out a little while ago was not to be rich. That was like really far down. It was to have a community, and so maybe that's the American dream, right? So we can flip it and it doesn't have.
And also, I just don't think, I think authenticity is a word that can feel very daunting because it feels like this huge leap, when I think a lot of the time, authenticity, and this is a very weird example, but authenticity can be as little as when you're watching a TV show and you see someone type out a text and it looks like they're actually typing out the text, right? Like that's not a crazy leap, but it's just a little change. And so, having other people in the room that can contribute to the conversation doesn't mean that the entire narrative is changing. It can be anything as little as the addition of a word, right? Or even a poster on someone's bed, or whatever, that adds to the authenticity, and it adds to making something more grounded in a way that isn't this huge Herculean feat.
Absolutely. So we only have a couple more minutes. I can't believe it. It's almost already done. So just for fun, sometimes I've done this at the beginning of the thing, but now I'm going to do it at the end. What can you think of, maybe a piece of media when you were an adolescent? That would be ideal. But if not, maybe a piece of media that you consume now. And it could be music, it could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be TV, it could be socials, that really felt to you like it spoke to character virtues, it spoke to your values, it resonated with you, it stuck with you. And I'll start with you, Mary, and we'll end it up.
but I'm not the expert on this. I mean, I guess I would say the honest truth, when I was, I don't know, a young person, 16, 17 in there, I was really quite influenced by some of the American folk music artists at that time. And Bob Dylan, others, right? Like a whole genre of music who were speaking to the kinds of values of pacifism and tolerance, and sort of showing up in the world with an open disposition toward complexity. That I think that was very formative for me across my high school and college years. Yeah.
I think music can be so powerful.
Yeah. I also played the music, and I wrote music, like not in a great way, but, just for myself, with my sister, with my friends, we would perform, and I think that, all of that, engaging in that making of meaning together and sort of representing it to other people is a very, very fundamental way of understanding and building yourself as a young person. And so I think I did that through music.
Mine is a little off the beaten path, but it was Power Rangers. I remember watching Power. For me, it was always just the concept of these regular kids, these regular high school kids that were chosen to take on the responsibility of saving the world. And I don't know that, right? Like that always to me just and sort of and with the way the whole Power Rangers work, it's like at after every generation, the duty of being Power Ranger transfers to another set of kids, and so this sort of intergenerational responsibility to protect the world always really spoke to me. Which I don't know why that was what I got from that as a kid, but.
I mean, seriously,
that's cool. That's authentic right there, right? That is actually a really cool thing for a young kid.
And that is like a really popular show, and possibly because these kinds of values came out through it, and they're meaningful, intergenerational, relationships. I wish there were more of them. So yeah. I was just thinking, I'm reading Jada Pinkett Smith's book, and she was talking about how hip hop, like the people who were the hip hop she consumed as a kid, it had all the history integrated into the songs that she wasn't getting in school. And, and like today we need it even more.
Yes.
So these places where you can integrate these stories and, thinking about what you were talking about, Mary Helen, is, when it's not happening in these institutionalized settings, storytelling is the place where it can happen in media.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's it. We went a few minutes over. I am so grateful to both of you. It's way too short. I'm sure we could have kept going forever. Olly, what's the name of the play you're doing?
The musical I'm doing out in New York, it's called the Buena Vista Social Club.
Oh, cool. Is it based on the documentary?
It's based on the Grammy-winning album that the documentary is based off of.
Cool.
It's very cool. We open off Broadway in the middle of December over at Atlantic Theater.
Okay. I'm coming out for it.
It's a great time. Honestly, one of the most artistically fulfilling experiences of my life. It's beautiful.
Love it. Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Yalda. Bye.